Hello and welcome to the live stream. Today I'm going to do a general Q&A all about Ecamm Live because it's something that I've had a lot of questions about since last week's stream and also since releasing my free Ecamm Live Masterclass, which I'll talk about a little bit later as well. But yeah, certainly I've had a number of different questions that have come in over the past week all about this. So I want to just run through some of those questions, but also, of course, open it up. So if you are watching live and you've got any questions, then feel free to drop those into the chat, and if you're watching on the replay, always feel free to drop those in there. But you may also want to see if your question is answered in the Ecamm Live Masterclass, which, as I said, is mentioned in the show notes in the description and pinned to the top of the chat. So with that in mind, let's just get into a few of these questions, shall we? And the first question was something that I had a call with somebody about just the other day, in fact. Hey, George. Hey, let me just say a few hellos. How rude of me not to say hello while we're here, because it actually relates to this scene which I've got set up. So here we go. That is a comment that I was doing for some testing, but here is the first comment from today's stream. Hey, George, great to see you. And hey, Rabbi David as well. Great to see you here too. So the first question was about this scene that I had created. Now, I've got to give full credit to, there's an awesome guy in the Ecamm Live community, Paul Dixon, and he's just got such a great eye for design and creates some really thoughtful designs. And I've got to say, he always does a much better job at me than a much better job at it than me. But I always take inspiration from any time he posts anything. And everybody always seems to used to have these little comment strips down at the bottom of their live streams, and I certainly did that because I just followed what everyone else did, quite honestly. But he set up these scenes where it was a dedicated comment section, and I just like the look of it. As I say, he's got a really great sort of design eye for these things. So I took some inspiration from him for this. So the way that this scene has been built, and actually the question wasn't about how it's built, but I will just explain it nevertheless, since we are doing an Ecamm demo. The way that this scene has been built up is that over on this side, I've got my camera overlay. So let's just actually, if I just hide some of these things out of the way. So we've got a rectangle and we've got the quote there like that. So this is just my background. And incidentally, my background is made up of let's just break this down. So going back to first principles here. So my background, show in background, is made up of this, which is my scene background image. This is something that I'm using in some promo for my Digital Stage Academy and events and things like that. So this is just an image that I've got for that, which is in itself a blend of two different stock images. But then I've also got this one, which is this, whoops, not this one, which is actually an Adobe stock animation. Now, if I just bring this back and make it as it normally is, this actually looks just like this. So this is an animation, as I say, from Adobe stock. It's just a looping animation, so it's just continuous, a movie file, I should say, that's looping. And what I've done is I've dropped the opacity down slightly, but then what I've also done is I've used this thing called blend mode. And what that does is it basically blends it with the background. And there are all these different ways that you can blend. As you can see, it's sort of changing the effect that it's having as I go through these. But I've just used this overlay effect. And what that does is it sort of preserves, as you can see, those background colors, but just adds that sort of movement to it, because I wanted something that was kind of a subtle movement, not too quick, nothing too drastic. So that just sort of sits in the background. And then I've got these little sort of swirls at the top and the bottom, which match some of the aesthetic of some of the stuff in the Digital Stage Academy and the events I'm doing for that. So that is the background. Now, if we go on to here, where it says, where are we now? Where I've got my camera. So let's drop that in. So there is my camera. Now, when you add a quote in, a comment into the chat, into the thing. Oh, and by the way, thank you very much, Mark, who has just become a channel member. Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate your support, as always. I always appreciate your feedback as well, certainly with things like around the affiliate program. It's taken on board lots of your suggestions, as you know. So really appreciate you, and thanks for joining. So when you bring a comment in, it's going to come in sort of like this. You can change the formatting of the comment. So with comments, you can change things like the text formatting. So if I bring this box over here, and you can basically highlight the name, and this will be preserved for like the next comment that we bring in. But I could change the text color, could change the font size and everything like that, and then that can be changed independently of the actual text that is going to be the message, effectively the actual comment. So then you can also change the background and border and the text margin. Let's just put a border on this, and let's give it a background color. So I'm going to choose background color, and we'll just leave it like that. So normally a comment is going to come in with a background, a border, and a color to it, just like that by default. Now, what I did, as again taking a leaf out of Paul Dixon's book, was that I actually just removed the formatting from this itself. Oh, and by the way, the other thing is, the default is going to be a dynamic text overlay, where basically it fits the text into the size of the, fits the box around the size of the comment. But because I wanted this to be always in the same place, I clicked on the pencil icon there and then changed that box to, instead of a dynamic box, we're changing it to this one, a text box. And what that does is that makes it an actual text box, just like that. So there you can see that now we've got a box. Now, the critical difference there between those two is you've got one version which is shrink, which is where if the text is too big to fit in the box, it's going to shrink it to fit it. Or if it is too long to fit in the box, then it can truncate it and basically just show whatever. Now, I don't think I'm going to get comments that are going to fill that box, but nevertheless, I did just set it to shrink anyway. So if somebody posts a comment that doesn't fit in there, then it will just shrink the text to fit. But as I say, what I wanted to do was actually take off all of that formatting. So I'm just going to undo all of this to put it back to where it was. Whoops, there we go. Let's get that comment back up there. Now then, rather than use the actual text overlay to apply the styling, what I've done is I've just got a rectangle that is behind it, and that is giving me the styling. And the reason for that is because you're kind of confined to where the border is going to come and the overlay. So for example, it would normally sort of cut through the avatar there. So I wanted to just make that it was going to be, out from the edge and just style it a little bit more independently, as I've done here. The other thing that I've done then is you can see that my camera is basically pointing in slightly, and the text overlay, or at least this has the effect that it's pointing in. And that's this option that you've got here, which is perspective. So just adding a bit of perspective, you can obviously go way too far. But if you just put it to wherever it was before, I think 50 is where I got it, then it just gives this sort of like little look that you are kind of looking into the content a little bit more. So then finally, the thing that I added to this was basically these. I could have used a graphic for this, but this is literally just a text overlays, and I've got text overlay for a set of quotes, and then basically just duplicated it and changed the color and offset it a bit. So that's where I've got those quotes. All of this is to explain how I created this scene, but that wasn't the question that I was actually answering to somebody on this call. And it was the fact that they had this situation where the comment was going up into the comment scene. But the idea about this is that we've got the comment there up on the screen, but as I switch over to something different, then the comment is not following me around to that other scene. And the reason for this, and if it is happening that the comment is following you around, and by following you around, let me show you what I mean with that. If I was to just, let's say, put up a comment here, thanks, Mark. So this is your nudge to get you up early on Fridays, yeah. So Mark's in a similar time zone to me as well. So now that we've got this comment here, if I was to switch over to a different scene, you can see that the comment is still there. It is still there. It's a bit hard to read, but the comment is still there, and it's kind of following me from scene to scene. But obviously, the idea is that if you've got a dedicated comment scene such as this, you don't want the comment to follow you around. You want to be able to just add the comment up, and it just stay in that scene. And of course, I've adjusted the formatting, so now it's not coming in correctly. This is because I've been playing with these things and demonstrating them on the fly. But let me just make that a little bit bigger. Let me just quickly adjust that. This is the problem with demoing these things. I always end up screwing up my scenes as I'm actually doing it. But there you go. That's the idea. So the reason for this is when you are in a scene that is locked, and this is the answer to this is the very long-winded answer to the question. When you are in a scene that is locked, by which I mean you've got the scene locked up there, if I go up to this main section, for example, main scene, you can see that the scene is locked. Now, when I add in a comment, so I'm going to click on a comment here. Let's just hit George's comment. Whoops. You can see that that appears on the screen, but the area where it goes is this one, show in all scenes. Now, if you are in a scene which is not locked, such as the comments scene here, and then I add a comment up here, you'll see that that is then going into the show in current scene. So because it's showing in current scene, it's not then getting pushed across to, you know, when you change scene or whatever. So so that is the answer to the question. If you're finding that comments are not coming where you're expecting them, then just check whether your scenes are locked. Now, annoyingly, you know, we always say to people, make sure you lock all your scenes. Well, this is one instance where you don't want it to happen. And in fact, you know, another instance is just any time where you do want to be able to activate something, but have it show up just in that one particular scene, then you also need to make sure the scene is unlocked then as well. And so to make sure that you don't inadvertently make any changes, you'd want to make sure that, you know, any elements in there that you definitely don't want to change are indeed locked. So for example, you know, in this scene, this is my main scene, I've left it unlocked because I've got this little animation that I can run in, which is all about the Ecamm Live Masterclass, where you can get access to 175 lessons for free. It's a complete masterclass on Ecamm. But I wanted this graphic to appear in the main scene, but then I could switch back over to, let's say, the website where I could go and run through it. And you notice how that overlay isn't there. But when I switch back to that main scene, that overlay appears again. So again, anytime when you want an overlay to be able to trigger it to activate in a particular scene, make sure the scene is unlocked, but all the contents are locked so that you don't make those mistakes. Now, there was another question that I had, and I actually made a Loom video about this to send to the person all about it, but I thought it'd be useful to share because it's something that you may want to do yourself. The question was this. It was if they've got a scene where they've got a series of overlays and they want to be able to swap out the overlays, like just sort of switch them out. They wanted it to happen immediately, but they didn't want to go and have a separate scene for each. So I'll just give you a really simple example here. Let's say we've got these different squares, and imagine that these are some sort of content, and you basically want this one to disappear and this one to appear at exactly the same time. You can obviously do this with Stream Deck, and so that was the question the person asked was, I know that I can do it with Stream Deck, but I'm looking for a way to do it where it happens more quickly, because if you do it in Stream Deck, and let's go over to Stream Deck here, of course the square's covering up the Stream Deck, but there you go. With Stream Deck, what you can do is you can create a multi-action like this, and then we can use the show hide overlay section, and then we'll use the show hide overlay to select that blue square, and then we'll use the show hide overlay again, but we'll use this one to show our other overlay, which is the yellow square, like that. And then now we've got this button here, and when I press it, then what's going to happen is the blue is going to disappear and the yellow is going to appear. But as you can see, there was a slight delay, ever so slight delay, and that was what they were looking to actually remove. Going the other way, the delay's reversed. It's actually, one stays on longer than the other. Now, in multi-actions in Stream Deck, there is a delay function, but this is not what we're talking about, because as you saw, there was no delay that I added in there. If you did want a distinct delay between it, you could just come and put this delay function in there, like this. And then you could change that to, like, let's say I make that 3000, which would be a 3-second delay. Now, when I press the button, you'll see what happens. It disappears for 3 seconds, and then the other one appears 3 seconds later. But as I say, that's solving the wrong problem, because the whole problem was they wanted it to have no delay. So the way that you can address this slightly is in the Stream Deck, what they added in was these built-in delays for the individual actions, because there were certain things where they needed to make sure there was at least some delay, because sometimes when you're pressing buttons, bearing in mind you're simulating, physical presses on things almost, then you could get into a situation where it's basically jamming up, I guess, for want of a better word. So there used to always be a sort of built-in fixed delay to these things. And one of those delays was simulating the actual button press itself. And then the other one was the sort of actual delay between the simulated button presses of, those two actions. But then people were saying, well, we want to tighten that up. So they added in, I guess about a year ago now, actually, so not that recently, but they added in this little option here. When you click on any one of these actions, then you've got this option here to change those two delays. Now, these are the two things I was talking about. One is the sort of simulated time of the button press and release. And there it's set to 100 milliseconds by default. And then you've got the time between action 1 and 2 as well after the button press of button 1. And so that is 100 milliseconds. So you could tighten this up by just dropping those all the way down for 1 millisecond. And that would shave off, almost 0.2 of a second. I guess you could also, the delay part of this isn't going to be a factor because there's nothing coming after it, but I suppose you could also reduce that one down. But now what happens is when I press that button, you'll see how it's a lot quicker. It's really happening a lot more quickly than it was before. Trust me. I know it probably isn't because we're talking about milliseconds, but you get the idea. It's just sort of removed some of that delay there. So that is one way of doing it. The thing about this, though, is you would then need to duplicate this button here. So let's copy this button and we'll paste it in here. And then you would need to go and have another one then that is changing overlay from yellow to red, like this. And then do it again for the other one. So basically, we'd be creating like a string of buttons here. So you press button 1 to go from blue to yellow, and then press another one from the yellow to red. Obviously, using these with actual overlays that you want to do. So that was one solution that I gave to sort of tighten up those distances between those things, the gaps between those overlays showing. There is a way that you can do it in Ecamm, but this one is a little bit more, to my mind, a little bit more risky. And that is, and I'll explain why that is, but that is that in the overlays window up at the top here, you have got an option which says next overlay, and it's got a shortcut which is Control Shift left and right arrow, basically. And what that means is if I just highlight the overlay itself, so let's say I activate this overlay, I'm in the overlays window and I've also got the overlay highlighted. If I now press Control Shift and then right arrow, it does actually switch them out, and I can go back and forth between them. And it is switching them out at the same time as the one's going off at the same time as one is coming on. So then, of course, you could go and just add a shortcut to Stream Deck for that as well. So coming over to Stream Deck, in that case, that would just be a regular system action, which is a hotkey. And you drag the hotkey on it and then do, Control, Shift, right arrow like that. So now we've got a button on our Stream Deck to basically advance that thing. Now, am I pressing the right one? Okay. So I'm pressing it, it's not doing anything. Herein lies the issue. The issue is you do have to make sure you have clicked in here and it is highlighted. And then now when I press it, there we go, now it's working. That is the very problem that you have with this, is that you do have to be in here. So it means that if you're doing this as part of a show and you've got a particular flow where you need these things to go through sequentially, then you just need to make sure that you've got your overlays window open and you're clicking in it. That's funny. There's me saying, I wonder why this isn't working. And it was the whole point of me highlighting the issue with this. So that is another way of doing it. But anyway, that was just a question that came up this week. So I thought that might be useful for some other people if they're wanting to sort of switch out their overlays. And as I say, specifically with minimal delay in there. So let me just pop back here. We've got a question. I've got a list of others to get through, but I'll certainly prioritize any that come into the chat. Hey, Mr. Awesome. We've got the same name. Hi, that was a terrible thing to say, wasn't it? Hi, Alec. I do streaming and Zoom classes online. Do you have any recommendation for audio video interface? I have Camlink for cameras, looking to stay under $600. I use a PodMic USB XLR. under $600. It's, I tell you what the my absolute favorite is, in fact, not the one that I'm using. So I'm using the Rodecaster Pro 2 over here. My camera's all over the place. Let me just adjust my hotspot. There we go, bring it back. So I use the Rodecaster Pro 2. My absolute favorite, though, is what is sitting on the shelf behind me, which is the Rodecaster Duo. And the thing I like about that, I only say this, you might think this is maybe overkill, maybe not, but it's specifically with you talking about live streaming and Zoom classes. Now, Ecamm can, if you, I don't know whether you're using a Mac or whether you're using Ecamm. This is obviously an Ecamm stream, so I'm guessing. With the new Ecamm for Zoom integration, technically, Ecamm can handle all of the audio. So audio goes from Ecamm into Zoom and from Zoom into Ecamm. And obviously on a live stream, all of the audio is going through Ecamm to that as well. The thing that I love about the Rodecaster in particular is the fact that we get 3 independent channels that we can take into our computer. And so the Rodecaster Duo, let me just check the price, given that you've specified a budget. I want to make sure that I'm not talking about something that's over the top, but I absolutely love it, and this is the reason why, is for Zoom live streaming in particular, and obviously the pod mic works well with it. So the Rodecaster Duo is in fact $499. So let me just drop this in here. There we go. And so, yeah, the Rodecaster Duo is $499. And what that has is the fact that it doesn't have Pro in the name is, I guess, a real misnomer, because it is every bit as pro as the Rodecaster Pro 2. The thing that is different about it, though, is it's just it only has 2 XLR inputs. I say only because, you know, if most people are not using those, if they are doing the same sort of stuff as I'm doing, it does also have a headset jack in the front, where in theory you can plug in any sort of headset mic, something like, something like this that has the mic boom. I've taken the mic boom off mine, but you can also just plug a lavalier mic into it as well. So that's the way that I actually use that socket on the front when I'm using that one. Yeah, you can just have a lav mic plugged into that. But the thing that it gives us, which the Ecamm for Zoom doesn't, is really granular control over audio. So for example, right now I'm streaming to YouTube, but I am actually in a Zoom call as well, because we have the live stream backstage that is for channel members and Digital Stage Academy members as well, so people can join in the backstage. And this is where I've got my Zoom call going, but my audio routing is set up on the Rodecaster. And as I say, I'm using the Rodecaster Pro 2 because I've started testing more mics and things like that, so I just needed an extra mic slot. But honestly, the Duo is, for me, the perfect one. It's got absolutely everything that, in theory, I need if I wasn't making YouTube content about mics. Whoops, that's the wrong scene. Let me just come back to here. So what I've got on my Rodecaster is this fader here is for my mic, so I can move that up and down. I've got another fader here, which is, well, forget that one. That is actually for another mic that I'm testing. But then I've got Ecamm on another channel. So that means I can control all of Ecamm's audio and sound effects and things like that. Then there's another one which I'm using for Discord, for Zoom, I should say. So that means that I've got independent control over that. I used to do the backstage in Discord, so I have a control over that separately as well. But if you're doing events where you've maybe got people coming into Zoom and then they are going to be speakers or guest speakers and feeding them into another Zoom call, for example, which you can do with Ecamm for Zoom, then you can control that one independently as well. And then you've got the sound pads and things like that on here too. So it allows us to do all of the routing. And the thing is, I like the fact that we've got all of this independent control, and we can sort of visually see as well where things are coming through. There's another feature as well, which is, let me just use my handy cam, this one. So there's another feature as well, if it focuses, which is down at the bottom. You have these buttons, which are, the green one is for listen, whereby if you are the host, as in on headphone socket 1, which I am, then any one of these channels that you hit this little green button, you can't probably see that, but it's got a little picture of an ear on it. When you press the green button, it means that you are listening to that channel, and the idea behind it is that you can isolate one channel to maybe, queue up some music or something like that. The way that I do it, though, is I basically select that on all channels. So I am listening to all channels, but then I use the red mute button to selectively mute things that I want to be able to hear, but that I don't want to go out into the mix. So when I hit the mute button on here, this is my Zoom channel over here. Now, when I hit this mute button, it means that I can still hear anything that's been said in the Zoom channel. I can adjust the volume of it so that it's maybe not quite so loud in my ear, which is what I do. Not that there's a lot of noise in there. But then it means that pressing this button here means that it doesn't go out into the mix. So that's how I can use this for, events or webinars or workshops, or indeed things like this, where I want to be able to have the Zoom audio come in, but just not pass through into the to the live stream. It's also great then for, let's say for a workshop, maybe the first part of the workshop is delivering some content, even though, you request everyone to be on mute and maybe don't allow them to unmute in the Zoom call, still there's potential for audio to come through. So having it muted in there means that the audio definitely isn't passing through into Ecamm. But then at the time when you start, bringing people up to ask questions, then you can press that button to allow that. Now, in terms of Ecamm, and I just noticed that you said Rode Duo is what you were looking at. It's honestly, it's the best. I almost wish I didn't test mics, because then I wouldn't need to have the Rodecaster Pro 2 on my desk. But I mean, that's awesome as well. Don't get me wrong. But so let's take a look at just some settings to be aware of then in Ecamm, because if I go over to the Zoom settings in Ecamm, this button was added in specifically at my request, actually, because they'd handled all the Zoom audio, and then when they integrated, did the Zoom for Ecamm for Zoom integration, and then they'd thought, well, surely everyone's just going to want to use the built-in audio routing now that it's all handled. But yeah, there are certainly advantages to doing it ourselves. So this one here is where you switch over to manual audio mode, and then that means that in the Zoom settings, which are from the Zoom window in Ecamm, you open up the Zoom meeting settings, and that is what this looks like for me. Audio. So in my case, I've got the Zoom audio going through Rodecaster Pro 2 main stereo, secondary in Zoom, whilst in Ecamm, I've got my audio set over to here, which is main stereo. So I've got my Ecamm audio on one channel, and then I've got my Zoom audio on another, and that's what's doing the routing, or whatever you want to call it, as the mic input as well. So highly recommend it. You'd mentioned that you were thinking about it already. Excellent choice. I second it. so it's definitely one to check. Hey Florence, great to see you here. Thanks for stopping by. Hello to you too. Great, and thanks for popping in to say hi. Really appreciate it. And Valerie as well. Great to see you here too. Everyone just popping in to say hello. Hey Yolanda, great to see you as well. We were chatting yesterday, I believe. Was it yesterday? I forget the time. So yeah, those are a few of the, let me get back to my list of questions, because there's a few others that came out just recently. There's some that came up in the Digital Stage Academy. So in that we have weekly office hours. Actually, I do 2 office hour sessions a day, sort of on a Thursday for me, 12 hours apart, to capture different time zones. But one of the things that came up in that was talking about color correction, and somebody was talking about they were going to get an editor to do something, and they wanted to do a bit of color correction in their videos that were coming out of Ecamm. Now, of course, you do have the let's have a look in here. You do have the camera effects settings, so I can go in here and change things like, the brightness and things like that, temperature and so on, by adjusting these sliders here. But that isn't necessarily, and it is always, I should say as well, if you can adjust this stuff at the source, as in the camera, it's always better to try to get those things correct there first. But there is always the option to create a LUT, and a LUT stands for lookup table, LUT, and that is something that's used in, you know, cinematography and photography all the time, where you want to create a stylistic look to it. You know, I'm sure you've seen movies where they've got a very specific look to them, which is obviously just not, or doesn't look like it's straight out of the camera, so on. And so that is something that's created with a LUT. And so I thought I'd just show you how to create one of those in Photoshop, because I do have a LUT on here, and if I just dial it down, there's not much of a difference. It's not doing much, but if I put it all the way at sort of full power, you can see how that's really extreme, and that looks a little bit odd, quite frankly. So you won't want it to I didn't want to have it quite up that high, but I thought I'd just show you some of the things you can do to adjust the color, because where I'm adjusting this down here is this LUT here, select LUT, and then you've got a way to basically just increase the amount that you are applying to that. So let's take a really quick look at how to do that in Photoshop. I guess you may not be using Photoshop, but there are other softwares to do it. I don't know whether this is any good, but yesterday when we had the call about it, they were saying, is there a way to create one? So I said for free, like a free tool. So I thought, I'm sure there must be some sort of free online LUT creator. And so I did a search for it, and the first result was freeonlinelut.com. I've not used it. I don't know if it's any good, but there are certainly free options there. Now, what I've got is I've got my image that I've taken into Photoshop. Now, you may think, well, how do you get a good quality image out of your camera just like that? Well, there is a feature in Ecamm, which is that you can take a photo. This was added in because people asked for it for, let's say, creating thumbnails from within Ecamm, where they want to take their picture holding a product or whatever, I guess it could be. But if you go into the recording menu here, you will see that, I beg your pardon, it's not in the recording menu. Where is it? Yeah, it is there. I was just blind. It's literally the second one down. So in the recording menu, you can see it says save photo, and that's Shift Command G. And when you press that, you should see a little notification popping up down here. So when I click on save photo, in theory, there you see it says photo saved, and that photo will have been saved into wherever you save your recordings. Now, if you want to use this for some other other use, like for example, you know, taking a photo for thumbnails, what you may consider doing is adding a Stream Deck button, perhaps with a delay. You could create a button with a, let's say, a 3-second delay. Whoops, what's going on there? My output seems to be a bit wonky on that monitor. There we go. So you could have a button that you press, gives you a 3-second delay, and then triggers that keyboard shortcut so that you've got time to do your YouTube face for whatever you want to do. But anyway, in this case, what I did is I took a picture to import into Photoshop. Now, in Photoshop, you bring in the image, and you just need to make sure that that is the background image that you've got in. It should just happen like that if you open it up in any case. But then what you're going to do is add in a new adjustment layer. So down at, well, it's off the bottom of the screen for you, isn't it? You fix that. Whoops. There we go. So down at the bottom of Photoshop, you've got this option for create new fill or adjustment layer, which is this little option just down there. And when you do that, it's going to add in well, let me click it. And of course, it's going off the bottom of the screen. This is where I need to make this a bit smaller just to show you. So when you click on this one, you're going to get this list. It's still off the screen. As you can see, this is highly planned. There you go. You've got all these different things that you can add, like the brightness, exposure, vibrance, hue, saturation, all of those other different things. Now, some of these are similar to the effects that you've got in the camera effects window, but the point is you've got slightly more granular control over them in here than you do in there, and there's certainly some other effects that you can add in. So the thing about this is when you're creating it, bear in mind that you've got that fader slider that when you're applying the LUT in Ecamm, that you can apply more or less of the overall LUT. You want to sort of urge on the side of it being on the side of it being sort of slightly over what you actually want it to be. So adding in like a levels adjustment like this, these are ones that I've already added in. Obviously, I'm just showing you the as I sort of add them in. Brightness contrast adjustment, the curves adjustment, color balance, and exposure. And as you can see, that is really sort of overkill. So you can dial those down from there a little bit. But the point is, once you have got something that is maybe a little bit more than you potentially need, then go into the file menu in here and go to export, and then export here. So it's create lookup table. And when you do that, then you're just going to give it a file name. Give it the file a name, but it's going to save it as this type of file. It's a .cube is the extension that it will have. So once you've exported it as that, you've done your color correction, then you've just got this .cube file, and so then you bring that into Ecamm over here. There will be a thing down in the camera effects window that says select LUT, and then you just add it in there. So there you can see that's the one that I added. You can see that's the file name .cube. And then, as I say, it's going to start with it at 0, but then you can just sort of dial that in as much or as little as you want. So you can use it to just sort of slightly improve the color of your camera, and it's just fixed in Ecamm rather than potentially having to do any color correction outside of Ecamm. So let's just go back to the questions. I've got a really strange issue today where my got my video monitor output to this monitor. It seems to be having a little bit of a fit. Let's try this. So let's see where we're up to. Hey, Joanne, great to see you. And used Zoom and StreamYard. Please tell me, what is the big I've used Zoom and StreamYard. What's the big advantage of Ecamm combined with Zoom? So the big difference really is that first of all, Ecamm has got this Ecamm for Zoom integration, which is whereby it's just sort of built in, so you can start a Zoom meeting within Ecamm itself. But the real big difference is that you can actually pull people out of the Zoom meeting and pull them up onto the sort of the digital stage, as I always call it. So you can have people that you can set up a scene in Ecamm, like I could have a scene like this, which is basically me and a guest, and then this guest slot here, I could have it that anybody that's in the Zoom call, I can pull them in there. Anybody who puts anything in the Zoom chat is just going to come through in the chat section of Ecamm as well. You've also got a lot more versatility in terms of the layouts that you can create in there too. So you can be really a lot more creative. It's easy to create scenes in Ecamm. So let me just show you what that looks like. For example, if we go into here, and I just create a completely new scene. So in Ecamm works like this. You've got a scenes window over on this side. Well, I say it's on this side, you can put it wherever you want. But if I just create a new scene, we've just got this blank thing. I talked about the way that I had added in all this background stuff, but let's just leave that off for the time being. If I want to add in a new camera, I can add that in. Maybe there's you. Maybe you want to duplicate that and have this as a guest that's also calling in on Zoom. Then maybe you've got another one. Now with StreamYard, I know they've got different layouts, but you're kind of still limited. You're running with the particular layouts they've got. I don't think you've got the same flexibility in terms of, well, maybe this person wants to be this size, maybe this person's down here, and then maybe you've got like a screen share going on or something else like that as well. So it's just the fact that you've got complete control over it, for me at least, that is, Ecamm's, one of Ecamm's big sort of strengths here. So we could put this one there, that one there, and then maybe this might be a screen share. So let's drop a screen share in. Just like that. That happens to be bringing in the chat of another screen. And then I can put all of that background stuff to give it my sort of background styling. I could switch those backgrounds out as well. And so for me, that's the kind of its real strength is the versatility and the ease with which you can create these different scenes. Another thing to mention, though, in terms of differences between StreamYard and Ecamm, Ecamm is Mac software, first of all. It's also a desktop application, so it's sitting on your desktop rather than StreamYard, which is you're sort of joining in the browser and then you're just selecting your camera and going into StreamYard, and then everything's happening in the cloud. That has its advantages because you're not then bringing in all of those feeds into your computer necessarily. The actual, real sort of heavy lifting potentially is happening off your computer. In the cloud, you're basically just feeding your camera in. So there is certainly pros and cons to both of them. I just like as I say, the versatility that you've got with Ecamm for creating whatever it is you want to do. The real superpower of Ecamm as well, though, is the three things combined together, which is Ecamm and, well, actually, let's say four. Ecamm and Stream Deck, first of all. I'm not sure about with StreamYard what the integration is with Stream Deck, because I'm guessing with it being browser based, you don't really have that same level of control. But it's the fact with Ecamm, for me at least, that I've got my Stream Decks. You just need one, but I've got several, and I've got some Stream Deck pedals. But these allow me to control everything in Ecamm. So all of my camera switching, I know that if I just reach down here and press this button, then it's going to switch back to this camera. So all of the camera switching is controlled by Stream Deck. So it allows you to have a really robust sort of live production environment. So Ecamm and Stream Deck, first of all, are a must, really. If you're using Ecamm, it's just the best. And Stream Deck is the ultimate productivity tool as well. Most people don't realize that until they get one for streaming. But those two things work together. Then when you couple it with Zoom and the new Ecamm for Zoom integration, so that you can actually pull people out of the Zoom, not technically pulling them out of the Zoom, but I mean, you can incorporate them into your live production to bring them up on stage. So for example, in workshops, when someone asks a question, they can be, have a scene where they're up on the screen next to you, for example. Or it could be speakers, you and a guest speaker talking, and so you're there doing a sort of two side by side, but and everyone in the Zoom is seeing that. So those three work together. For me, though, then combine this with Keynote. That now allows you to basically add in all of Keynote's things. So if I just show you, this is something I was literally working on yesterday. So let me just show you what this looks like. I'm creating an outsourcing masterclass, which is about, why we as solopreneurs should be outsourcing and why potentially people don't do this soon enough. And so the course is about that, and then talks people through how to use platforms like onlinejobs.ph, Upwork, and Fiverr to basically outsource their tasks. But I created a little presentation in Keynote around this as part of the course. So let me just show you what that allows you to do in combination with Ecamm, which again is something that I guess is not necessarily so straightforward to do with StreamYard, which is that you can combine Ecamm with the live video features of Keynote to create something that looks like this. So what you're actually seeing now, although you perhaps didn't see that, maybe a subtle color shift, but now what you're seeing is my camera coming through Keynote. And now I can use all of Keynote's animation tools to introduce this concept, which is, I've called it, in fact, this isn't the wrong one. This is the Eisenhower matrix. And so I based it off that. Let me just come back out of this because this is where I start my starting point for my thing that I created just yesterday was the Eisenhower matrix, where you look at what's urgent and not urgent and so on. But I wanted something that was specifically related to entrepreneurs and outsourcing. And so this, in fact, is what I created. I called it the case matrix. And the case matrix is where you've got things that are specialized expertise, which is your superpower, the things that you do, versus general expertise. And then you've got the difference between high revenue impact tasks versus low revenue impact. So thinking about the Pareto principle, where 80% of the results come from 20% of the actions. So as solopreneurs, we need to be focusing on those higher revenue generating tasks. And so this is the case matrix. So C is for concentrate. This is where you should be concentrating on what you do best and what drives your business forward. Now, there is always these limiting beliefs that we have for outsourcing, like people won't be able to do it as well as me. I don't have time to onboard people, don't have time to create the processes. I don't want to commit to anything. These are all limiting beliefs that basically are just frankly not true. Nobody can do it as well as me. Maybe not. Maybe that is your superpower, the place where you want to concentrate. But certainly when it comes to data entry and things like that, those are things that can be outsourced. The idea that you don't want to relinquish control as well is another one. So all of these things are addressed in the course. There's a PDF that will accompany this as well that I'll be releasing probably next week. But with that in mind, those limiting beliefs in mind, the purpose of this matrix was to talk about, like, where do you begin with the outsourcing journey? And so actually the first step then is to basically elevate your role above those mundane tasks and just remove them from your sort of daily responsibility. So those are things that are general expertise. They're not high revenue impact. Data entry, uploading content, all of those kind of things may be the first place to start. Next then is that we've got the separating yourself from those things that may well be specialized, getting back to this idea that people are reluctant to let go of things if they think that somebody might not be able to do them as well as they can. But it's a case of, letting go at least of those low revenue impact tasks. So that might be things like graphic design. I don't think I'm the best graphic designer, and I know that people can do it way better than me, but I actually love doing it. But it was a case of needing to let go of that to free up my time to focus on higher revenue impact tasks. So those specialized expertise, low revenue impact, would be the next things to let go of. And then finally, you've got the general expertise, high revenue impact. And this is the reason why I put that as the third point, which is accelerating your growth by basically expanding those higher revenue generating activities. The reason why that's third is because I appreciate that it's, maybe difficult to let go of responsibility and relinquish control to things that are having a big impact on the business. So that's the case matrix: concentrate, accelerate, separate, and elevate, and the order in which, you may want to take those on the solopreneur's journey to increasing your team size. Now, that little presentation there was just intended to illustrate the fact that I'm doing that all in Keynote, and the fact is that the video is coming through into Ecamm, but all of that animation, my camera sliding over and things like that, is just by integrating it with Keynote. And each of those steps that I was doing was just basically a button push on the Stream Deck, which is next point in the Keynote presentation. So I wasn't intending to go into a to a discussion about my case matrix, but that is where you were asking about that. That is why I love Ecamm, because direct integration with Zoom, integration with Keynote or PowerPoint would do the same. You can do the same things with PowerPoint with the live video and the morph transition, and then it's just a winning combination. So let me just see what the follow-up is. You've got a Stream Deck still in the box. I do live interview shows and vid tutorials. Want to add virtual classes on site with a small live class simultaneously taking place. So that the Stream Deck and Ecamm will be good at that. You do mention that you have an old MacBook, so that's something to just bear in mind, that some of the stuff I'm doing there, if you think about having video is kind of one of the most taxing things that you can have on your computer. So in the case, if you have got a very old Mac, then StreamYard is a good solution, because, as I say, you're basically just feeding in your video. What I'm doing there is I've got Ecamm running with video, I've got Keynote running with live video coming through Keynote, and then screen sharing that into Ecamm, and then I've technically got a Zoom call going with all of those Zoom feeds and stuff like that. So that can be taxing on an older Mac. Certainly, if you are looking to do this, then consider looking at one of the M series Macs. And these days, I would say, an M2, maybe an M2 Pro Mac Mini at the sort of very least, if you're going to be using this for revenue generating activity. Ultimately, it's a case of whether that's worth the investment. As for the Stream Deck, there is so I've got the Ecamm Live Masterclass, which is a now completely free masterclass all about Ecamm. And just to sort of give you a bit more insight into that, you might want to just go and grab that and then go through the quick start guide just to give you an idea of what it can do. But the way that I've laid out that course, it is actually a re-recording of my original Ecamm Live Masterclass, which was my most popular course from, I guess, two and a half years ago now that I made that original. And one thing I changed in this version of it is we've still got 20 different modules covering all aspects of Ecamm, and they go into real depth on each of those. So, for example, like Ecamm for Zoom, there is a whole section on Ecamm for Zoom that's got about 10 lessons in there. There's 175 lessons in there altogether, but I appreciate that sometimes it can be a bit daunting to go into a 175 lesson masterclass. And so that's why what I created was, at the beginning, there is an Ecamm Live quick start guide. And so this is just 15 lessons. If you go from start to finish through that, you'll have a really good grasp of Ecamm, what it can do, how to use scenes, overlays, all the different features, introducing Ecamm for Zoom. You'd be able to start a meeting and get people into your show. So the quick start guide is there for everyone to just get up and running with it. And then these other sections then are the deep dive sections instructions for that. You can find a link to this pinned in the top of the chat, and you can also find a link in the description as well. Or go to ecammlivemasterclass.com. So other than that, though, it would be a great fit for what you're talking about. Just bear in mind, though, the age of your Mac, and if it's an Intel Mac, I would say, you might want to maybe stick with StreamYard if that's something that you can't upgrade just at the moment, because it gets sort of processor heavy with some of those things. Technically, Ecamm will run on an Intel Mac, but I mean, if you're doing events and things like that, it's probably not quite up to the specs required. I've also got a Stream Deck Masterclass. That's a paid Masterclass, but you'll find lots of other Stream Deck videos on my channel as well to help you get up to speed with Stream Deck. The thing about Stream Deck, by the way, is when I bought my Stream Deck XL, which, by the way, is still sitting on my desk, everything else in my studio, it seems, has changed, but the Stream Deck is still sitting here. They don't really break. They're essentially just keyboards with little screens on it. So touch wood, at the moment, this is still the original. I then added more into the mix, but I bought it for camera switching in Ecamm. That was the reason why I bought it. It's called a Stream Deck, so I figured, it's a streaming tool. It's really a misnomer. They should have called it something different, because it's the ultimate productivity tool, and once you get one, you'll realize you can use it in all other aspects of your daily productivity routine, for setting up your screen with all the different apps you're using, opening different things up, and controlling your computer in ways that you never quite realize. So I definitely recommend dusting it off if it's still in a box, and getting it on your desk and starting to use it. Hey, Maurizio, thank you very much. I've got my wrong scene up. Let me just give this the full exposure it deserves. Thank you very much for becoming a channel member. I really appreciate it. And let me just see. You should have a little notification about that somewhere come through to you. Let's see where we're up to. How do you get different audio sources on one scene from, say, 3 capture cards? If you've got different audio sources coming into your computer and you want to combine those, so the way that the audio routing works, whoops, wrong one. I want to go to this. The way that the audio routing works on Ecamm is you've got the sound levels window here. The first one is your mic. Now, I'm using a Rodecaster, so that's why it says Rodecaster Pro 2 main stereo. But you can select any audio source from there. Then it's got these other sources which are sort of default to Ecamm. So if you play a movie within Ecamm itself as a scene, then that comes through here. Any sound effects that are coming through from the sound effects window, which is this one, will come into here. So if I was to play a sound, for example, like this, it should play this music somewhere. Somewhere it should play. So then if I just turn that off a second, then you've got system audio, so any audio from your system and so on, and then Zoom guests and interview guests. Now you can add one additional mic source. So your particular question was that you want different capture devices or whatever coming in. You could click the little icon here, and then you could select one other source to have the audio pass through from that as well. So the way that you could bring one extra one in. Obviously, you've got 3, so that's not what you're asking. So if you're not using an external mixer to actually mix these together, then it would be a case of using some sort of virtual mixer on the computer. Now, there is a program called Loopback, and this allows you to create what are effectively virtual devices. If I just open Loopback up, and it's completely empty because I've not used this since I've had the Rodecaster, even on this computer. But the way that you would do this in Loopback is you would click on New Virtual Device at the bottom, and then let's just remove this pass-through. What you would do is, if I delete that one, you would just go through and let's give this, we'll call this 3 input mix, and then you would click on Add. And then in here, whoops, sources. Oh, yeah, it is that one. In here, you could say like add Camlink 4K. If you've got some audio coming in from that, add Camlink 4K too. Add another audio source. Let's say live streamer Cat 4K. So let's say that that, I mean, that's actually coming out of HDMI capture devices, but I'm combining all three of those things, and they're now going through to a channel which is called 3-input mix. So now what I would do is in Ecamm, I would just go over to the audio settings. And if I think I probably need to restart Ecamm, but it would basically come through in those in the mic selector. So you've basically combined all three here. You can adjust the relative levels of them in here, and then you could select that one input in Ecamm. So that could be one way of doing that. So yeah, so that would be the answer to that. Hey Joanne, very interesting. So you are working in Keynote on the fly. Yeah, that's what I was doing there. It was, in fact, let me just show you what I was in fact doing. I will go to this window here, exit Keynote. So I basically got, make that so you can actually see it. It would help. I've got some videos. If you look for videos on immersive presentations on my channel, then what I've got is I've got live video coming into Keynote. So this is a live video, and you add that by going to Media, Live Video. So my video is coming into Keynote. The reason for doing that, though, is it allows you to use all of the animation tools. And what you'll notice is, well, you probably won't notice because it's too dark, but off over to the side here, I've got this sort of blue background with this little yellow strip down the side of it. And that's sitting just off to the side of this slide. And then what I've got is this scene, which has got that sort of matrix in that I was showing you. Let me just hide these elements. Hide object list, makes it a bit easier to see. Now what I've done is I've moved that blue background onto the scene. So I've moved it on, and I've also moved my camera feed. So instead of my camera being in the middle, I've moved my camera off to the side. And then these things here, the actual matrix content, I've added that as just, stock Keynote animations. But the transition between this one and this one, I've used the transition which is called Magic Move, and that basically looks at the position of things on one slide and then moves them to where they are on the second one. And that's what gives this effect of being able to press a button and it will just move out like that. And then press another button. This is now using the built-in animations on that particular slide. But once we've finished the introducing the content, when I press the button next, it's going to use that magic move again and move the blue thing off to the side and critically move my camera over. So that's what's giving the effect of being able to sort of move the camera around. I'll give you another example of that as well, because this is what I just love it for the animations that we can do with Ecamm and Keynote combined. So this is an event that I'm doing end of September called the Digital Stage Blueprint. It's a 3-day event, so I wanted to be able to just run through an agenda for it. So here again is showing you this process of using the animation. So it's a 3-part event. Part 1 is discover the digital stage. These bullet points that are going to come up aren't relevant. I'm in the process of making this as we speak. Then part 2, so you can see how I've got this animation. It's just a really nice way, I think, of adding some sort of visual appeal, and you're not speaking to a slide deck. The information is coming on the screen around you, but where you do need to present stuff on screen, then this is a great way of doing it. And then at the end, then this disappears. There's a VIP pass available for the event, and then after that all moves out. So it's not supposed to be a promotion for the event. I'm just showing you the Keynote process and how that all worked. So that's using a combination of Keynote animations and then also the as I say, the magic move function. Is there a use case where some of those Keynote animations could or should be added to Ecamm? yeah, so I do create like things like this. If I want to give a call to action, let's give a very direct call to action. If you need any help with any of the stuff I've talked about today and would like some one-to-one help, then you can book a call with me, and I'll just look at that. Ever the professional, I haven't even got my finger on the right button. Let me just go back and try that again, shall I? So if you need some help and want to know what button to press when, you can book a call with me using the following link. And isn't that always the way? I've actually removed the animation. Maybe just go to Discord then instead. Let's see if those are working. This is hilarious. It should have popped up, of course, with this one here. Now, why isn't that happening? This is the problem with moving folders around, isn't it? All right, let me try a different one then. It's always the way when you actually go to actually demo a thing, it never actually works. I use this literally every single week, and yet now it seems I've moved my source files around. I'll just answer the question. I'll just move swiftly on from that. Usually every week, literally for months, I've had these little things that pop up on screen, and it's like a little animation that says book a consultation or join the academy. Those things are recurring things that I'm going to use all the time, and so I want to have those as animations in Ecamm. So I add those things as overlays. But the question before I royally screwed it up. The question was, is there a use case for having these animations built into Ecamm? Now, if you mean, exporting the animations, importing them to Ecamm so that they're running within Ecamm as, movie files, that's the case when I would do it. If you are talking about, should Ecamm be adding in these sorts of things to Ecamm, I actually don't, because I think people get really, I love all the creativity in the Ecamm community of where people are saying, hey, look, I can create an agenda with just text overlays, and we can run through them by showing and hiding overlays and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's great. I love to see the creativity of all the things people do with shapes and text overlays and things like that. But I separate out the live production aspect of Ecamm, which is the camera switching, the sharing and all of those things, from the presentation side of things. So anything that is going to be a recurring part of a production, I have it within Ecamm. So apart from today when I screwed it up, things like those little animations that are going to pop out onto the screen, those are all within Ecamm. But anything that is specific to an event or a video or whatever, I would just use Keynote for that. And the reason is you're not bloating your Ecamm setup with a whole load of overlays and things like that are specific to some particular event or something like that. So that's my way of doing it. It's not that my way's right. That's just the way that I personally work with it. I mean, if it's like a video about some product or something, then I'm not necessarily creating a whole Keynote presentation about it. And yes, I may then add that in as an image overlay of the product. But generally, for these sorts of presentation type things, I'm using the Keynote separately. So Joanne, of course. So if you've got keystrokes in StreamYard, then yes, totally. How silly of me not to think. The Stream Deck, of course, can use keystrokes to control certain applications, so you can send keystrokes to the to StreamYard. So yeah, it entirely that works, of course. So yeah, Ecamm, it's a paid product. There is another piece of software that you might consider as well. I've got to say this for openness and completeness, which is OBS, Open Broadcast Software, which technically is a similar product to Ecamm. It's what I used before I got to Ecamm. I used it for all of a month and just thought, this is just hurting my brain. I don't like it. I don't like the way it works. Don't like the way it looks. And then I discovered Ecamm and never looked back. But OBS is a free option. I will say though, you're still going to have the same issues as Ecamm in terms of processor usage. And in fact, one of the things I found with OBS when I did use it, I always say I pulled out my last hair with OBS, but it was actually actually that it was even more restricted by processor. It seemed to me for what I was trying to do. But certainly the things that I've been doing today with bringing Keynote in, you could technically do that with OBS as well. Just to sort of frame the pricing of Ecamm, there is well, first of all, I can give you a discount code for it. So I'll just drop this into the chat. It is, if you go to ecamm.com/TakeOneTech, there we go, just drop the link in. That'll take you to my page on Ecamm's channel. But there is a discount code, TakeOneTech, which gets you 15% off your first payment. Now, that's 15% off your first month if you're on a monthly plan, or first year if you're on an annual plan. And so that reduces the cost somewhat. The annual plan obviously reduces the cost. You get 2 months free effectively or something like that with that as well. But just to put it into perspective, this is the way I always think of Ecamm. It's basically $1 a day. Now, if you are using Ecamm for revenue generating activity, you're running events perhaps, then, or just using it in your Zoom calls, it really does add a tremendous amount of value. So I always kind of put it into that perspective that, yeah, it's definitely adding more than $1 a day to my specific use case. I don't know if it will for you, but I thought that might be useful to just kind of reframe that a little bit. So yeah, well, sorry, I've missed, I didn't read the rest of your comments, so apologies. It would be a big upgrade and costly because, yes, it would indeed need the Mac, the Ecamm sub plus the Zoom subscription. So yeah, the Ecamm for Zoom integration still requires a Zoom subscription, and ideally the paid one as well. So apologies, I didn't even read the rest of your question. So let's see where we're up to. Hey, Eric, great to see you here. The Keynote trick, yeah, it's really good for sort of leveling up your Ecamm productions using the functions of Keynote that are designed for presenting with the functions of Ecamm that are used for live production. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I'm trying to stop making my live streams 2-hour events these days, so I will sort of wrap it up shortly. But if there are any other questions that anybody has got about anything that I've talked about or any of the setup, then feel free to drop them in. So Joanne, let's see. I'm going to ask you about OBS, but trying to save my brain and my budget may level up in the future with Ecamm. Most everyone in my yeah. So yeah, I mean, StreamYard's great. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to. It's not like I'm knocking it. It's great for what it does, and as I say, it offloads most of the processing as well. So it is a great solution as well. I would definitely say if you're going to do the upgrade and you're going to need a computer anyway to upgrade, then yeah, definitely I would recommend skipping OBS personally. I've been there and done that, and yeah, Ecamm is if you're on a Mac anyway, it's much more. Ecamm has got that Mac feel to it, whereas OBS is definitely open source, cross-platform, and to my mind, you end up with the not the best of both worlds. You end up with the worst of both worlds with the cross-platform software. So any other questions, though, feel free to drop them into the chat. If I had my nice little graphic to pop up to say join the Discord, I would drop that in. But for some reason, all of my graphics have disappeared because I did some moving around of things foolishly on my computer just the other day. And I've got OBS is great software. It's Eric is saying. And teaching it to all the Windows folks. Well, that's it. If you are on Windows and you're looking for an Ecamm alternative, then yeah, OBS is a good alternative for that. So yeah. With that said, then, if there are no further questions, and usually the second I press my button to end the stream, there'll be another question that pops in. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you have found this useful. And don't forget to go and check out the free Ecamm Live Masterclass. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you again very soon. I'll leave a link to some of my other Ecamm-related content just over there. And have a great day. I'll see you all very soon.